When most of us think about innovation, we think about technology. The two often go together, and the thoughtful integration of technology into our learning practices and environments is not only valuable, but I think for us to sustain in this environment, it's a must. Innovation in teaching and learning goes far beyond the latest technology. It really is that fundamental shift on how we as educators foster a deep and genuine understanding of discipline and of our students and their needs. And overall, all of us are here to contribute to learning success, and we can do better. No matter what, we can always do better. And I think self-reflection is a part of that, and I'm sure that's what you'll be doing during and after this session today. I'd like to also say in this plenary session, our panelists will look at the essence of inspiring learning in today's dynamic educational landscape, and we'll talk about what motivates faculty to explore new ways of igniting that curiosity and deepening learning. We'll share creative approaches to addressing modern educational challenges, and we are well suited to do so with this esteemed panel we have here today. So on behalf of everyone, thank you so much for giving more time. I think you've already given time to this conference, so we really, really appreciate your time. All right, so with that, I think we'll get started. This session has remote participants, and I'll give the instructions, which I think have been given throughout the day when the question and answer period begins. But basically, stay muted unless you are given the signal, I think, to speak. All right. So, any questions? Are we good? Are we all good to go? All right. So, our questions, what we'll do if we have the time is attempt to get to all three of you. But if you feel like, that it's been covered, feel free to say pass. No pressure to have to answer if you feel like it's already been done. So let's get started by sharing what you feel is the biggest change during your tenure that has most impacted your teaching. So Dr. Côté, do you want to start with that?
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Warren. I'm afraid I'll be repeating myself a little bit with what some of the remarks I've made this morning, but you've talked about the elephant in the room, about the transformation in technology that we've seen over the last few years. And there's some aspect of that that's been a godsend to some extent. From one of my courses, I was able to have 4 international experts whose work my students have read attend the class. So this is wonderful, something that, before Zoom would have been unheard of almost. So there is some aspect of that is wonderful, that helps engagement, and for the students to be able to put the face on the work that they've read so closely was also a really great opportunity. But with that also comes the challenges that can be brought by technology, by the shortcuts that technology can offer or can provide students. So for instance, this morning I've talked about how the good old days, we used to have to go to the library to, borrow a book, to read the book in order to be able to add that little citation in our article or in our work. Whereas now we can ask ChatGPT, what does the book say, and add that. But that's not learning. And so how do we encourage learning as an end in and of itself, not just as being able to cite what Smith 2007 had mentioned. So how do we foster that? How do we value that and make students understand the value in the process and not just the addition of the citation is a big struggle that I've been experiencing particularly acutely of late.
Yeah. Dr. Eaton, would you like to give some feedback on how it's influenced you the most in your career?
Well, technology. So I won't repeat what you've said, but I think broadly I would reflect on the level of complexity in our students' lives. So, I've been teaching for 30 years, and I came in the advent of the internet, and we thought, wow, okay, this is a big disruptor. And it was. And since then, we've had these waves of massively socially complex issues that have come forward. We've had COVID, we've had a pandemic, I remember being a student back in the early 90s at St. Mary's University, and I was editor of the student newspaper. We were watching the TV when the Gulf War broke out. And we said, but there wasn't supposed to be another war after the Second World War. That was supposed to be the war that ended all the wars. And we couldn't fathom that there was this big war. And now I feel like we're living in this age where there's war, there's climate change, there's pandemic, there's technology changing faster than any of us can keep up with. And I feel like the lives of our students today are more urgent and more complex than any generation before.
Yeah, for sure. And I see in my daughter, who's a teenager, what they are even learning is different, but also what they've been forced into. I mean, they were forced to go online before we really taught them how to do that. And they became self-directed learners without any real ability for us to navigate them, because we were all still working full time. So I think that's a really good, a key part of how the technology has been bumped ahead a little bit, I think because of COVID. Yeah. Dr. Byrne, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just quickly, and I guess I'll bounce off of both of you. I think related to the complexity of students' lives, it's just the busyness of students' lives. Like when I was a student, and I think of my colleagues, nobody had to work. Your job was to be a student.
Yep.
But now, I mean, we have students some of whom are working full-time jobs and doing 5 courses, so they don't have the same time that we perhaps think they do. So I think I think that sort of has an impact on what we can expect of them as learners. And then to bounce off the technology piece, and something you said in your talk this morning, Isabelle, about access to information. I can ask a question in class and they just Google it. There's no thinking, versus, again, before we had phones in our hands, a question asked in class was an opportunity for critical thinking and figuring it out and problem solving. And it isn't necessarily anymore, unless you say, don't Google it.
That's right.
Put your phones away. No computers. We're just going to sit and think with this. And that makes students often very uncomfortable. So it's that access to information, I think, that has robbed many of us of that opportunity to just sort of struggle with not knowing something.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's created
And what's really interesting is I remember 6 months ago, and the CITL folks were really, really answering all the questions about AI. And we were taught that for students, we need to say, it might not be accurate, but every single moment that people are feeding questions to AI, the accuracy is increasing. So it's just minute to minute. So that's a really, really great point. Okay, thanks. So let's move on to our second theme. So what is the core motivation that drives you to innovate within your teaching practice to inspire learning? That's a big question, I know. Do you want to start, Dr. Côté?
Sure. I was talking to a member of the audience earlier today about I'm someone who learns by doing, which is a problem, I guess, when you're a researcher and you read a lot. But you can tell me how to change a tire 15 times. If I don't see it and if I don't do it, it's just going to wash out. And I feel like a lot of students are also the hands-on type. So by providing applied learning opportunities, it helps students learn, but at the same time, it helps it stay there. It's a long-term learning as opposed to just who started this war and what year, etc., and then quickly flushed out. Mm-hmm. And so what was the term exact you used? What was my
teaching practice to inspire learning?
So my teaching practice then would be to favor or to prioritize hands-on learning any chance I have through the blog posts, for instance, that I've talked about this morning, the media analysis, things where students get to practice something as opposed to just being told, here are ways for you where you can collect material, things like that.
Do you feel the burden is higher when we have to do experiential type learning, hands-on learning? Is the burden higher on the people teaching? Do you feel?
The workload?
Yeah.
Well, it certainly does. The first year you develop a course where it's applied learning, there's definitely there's a learning curve.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a lot of work that goes into it. But I'm hoping that this becomes slightly lower and lower, just as, the first year we develop a syllabus, the first year we develop a new course. There's a huge amount of work that gets done so that the course can be ready by September 9th. But after that, the following year, we've got material that we can reuse, adapt. But yes.
And if we can pass that on to others who are afraid to try, it does get easier. I agree. I think that's definitely the way it works. Dr. Eaton, do you want to?
I think for me, it's changed over the course of my career. But if I could boil it down to one thing, it's I'm a learning junkie. I always I want to be learning the next new thing. When I was early in my career, I wanted to be perfect at everything. So I spent a lot of time learning how to be organized. I prepared lesson plans for my classes. That didn't last long. I wanted to learn all the new technology that came out, and then I wanted to know how to use it perfectly in my classes. And over time, I got more comfortable being uncomfortable with not knowing all the answers and all the latest teaching practices. And as I get even further in my career, I think it's gotten to a point I don't care if I try something and it flops in my class, because I'm okay saying to my students, I'm trying this, it's the first time, and if it flops, we're going to pivot and we're going to try something else. But when I first started teaching, that would have been way too scary.
Right.
But I've gotten more comfortable being uncomfortable and being vulnerable in front of my students.
And that makes them not only better learners, but if they choose to be teachers, which everyone is at some point in their life, that teaches them to be more vulnerable, right? Dr. Byrne?
Can you just read the question?
No problem.
I've been listening and not.
What is the core motivation that drives you to innovate within your teaching practice to inspire learning?
So I'm a lover of learning. It's what I remember most about my childhood, and I just fed off it. And I just remember figuring stuff out, just struggling with something, whether it be tying my shoes or when I was a grad student, figuring out Fourier transform, whatever, and just the joy of figuring it out. Yeah. And early in my career, I recognized that not all students were feeling that joy. They weren't in love with learning. And as I taught more and I guess got more experience and whatnot, I realized that, well, maybe I can play a role there. What can I do to try and inspire that love of learning in my students? And that's really what sort of got me starting to think about, well, how can I change how I teach to help create some of that inspiration for learning? But at its core was I just wanted people to love learning. And I felt that the way I was teaching early in my career wasn't necessarily doing that.
Have you been able to maybe put into words what it looks like to you, how you recognize someone who might not be liking learning at the beginning of a class or a project, but in the end they do? Do you have a way that you can recognize that?
It's easy to see when they do, because they're engaged. Mm-hmm. Or, we've all had that time with a student where they're asking a question or explain, and all of a sudden that look comes over their face and they're like, I just got that. You've been telling me that for 4 years and I just got it. I'm graduating next week, but I finally got. Where's Joanne? I finally got moment arms.
It's that light bulb moment.
It's that light bulb moment, right? And the not loving it, it's is this on the test?
Yeah.
It's those types of types of things. Not being truly engaged in the process.
Great, thank you all so much. So we'll go to question 3. I might change the order around to put less pressure on Dr. Côté every time. Mm-hmm. So Dr. Eaton, I'll put the pressure on you for our next question. So this one's a scenario, so you might need me to repeat it. If you do, please let me know. Each of you each have been given the opportunity to mentor a new faculty member within your academic unit. Think back to your time as a new faculty member and draw on what you know now about teaching at the university and our current landscape. What one piece of advice would you give your mentee and why? So Dr. Eaton?
Oh, that one's easy. Make sure you know where the Teaching and Learning Center is. No, but in all seriousness, I think lots of new faculty don't know all of the resources, and it's kind of the same thing on our campus, the resources, the workshops, all of the things on the website, and to kind of take them over, physically, even walk someone over and introduce them around and then say, here's a list of the workshops, and help them identify what is it that you need to be successful and how can the Teaching and Learning Center help them, because I think the Teaching and Learning Centers folks are the unsung heroes of our campuses.
Yeah.
And that's not just because you invited me.
No, I'm so happy you highlighted that. And every day I try, particularly with accessibility, when people are saying, where are the resources? How do we learn? How do we get people in here to teach us? I'm like, look online. There's so many resources with CITL. So we all have, I think, a role in that, spreading that awareness and getting people to tap into the resources that so many people vest their time in. Dr. Byrne, do you need me to repeat the
No,
scenario?
no, I got this one. I was only one person, so I.
Okay, sorry.
Short attention span. So after I show them where CITL is, I'm going to tell them three things. I'm going to tell them, be passionate about what you're teaching students, because they feed off of that passion, right? Just be passionate and excited, because we can't expect them to be passionate and excited if we're just going through the motions. There'll be days when we do, but most times they don't notice those odd days. So be passionate about what you do. Show students that you care, or not show students that you care about students.
Yep.
And show them that you care. I think I should have said that first, and that's probably even before they go to CITL. Show them that you care. They're human beings. They just want to feel like they're valued and that you care about their success. And then following off that, I would tell them, if you don't care, then don't teach. Like, find somewhere else to go. I've heard too many stories from students who have been taught by people who don't care. For whatever reason, there's all kinds of reasons why people don't care. And it just breaks my heart that we are crushing students because we have people teaching who don't care about them as people, right? And I think if we care, then how you teach, it almost doesn't matter. Show them that you care, be passionate. There was a third thing, which I can't remember now, but.
That's okay, you can add it in after.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's important for students to know that they are the center, but for all of us, we work here. I think most of us who are in the room, we don't exist without students. So if you don't care about students, this is not the business that you want to be in. So I agree. I think that's a really good point. Dr. Côté?
Earlier, Sarah, you said something, don't be afraid to be unsettled or don't uncomfortable. Yeah. That's it. I think that's a great advice. I think that all first-timer in front of a classroom is terrified of looking like we're not expert in our field and we're not credible teachers. And so this is definitely something I would tell myself or my younger teaching self. But something else I would add is find yourself your support group. I don't know if many of you in the class, in the classroom, it's not a classroom, in this room, attended MUN 101 or something to that effect when we started. I started at MUN in 2015, which was one of the last big years of hires. And I still remember there were at least 40 of us in that Gushu Hall being welcomed to the university. And after that, 4 of us from that session, we were strangers, found ourselves to a bar, trying to make sense of our new reality of being new faculty member here at MUN. And to this day, 2 people from business, 1 person from archaeology, and myself and poli-sci have been hanging out. And it's wonderful to have people outside your department, because then you can vent, you can share, you can also exchange advice. Like, you do that in your faculty? I didn't know that could be a possibility. And so finding your support group was life-changing for me, and I hope other people have that ability to new faculty members also have that ability to find that.
And if you don't find it, it can be really tough. Yeah, really, really tough. All right, we'll move to question number 4. And maybe Dr. Byrne, we'll start with you on this one. This one's a long question, so everybody get their pens ready. There are so many trends impacting the way we approach teaching today: diverse learner needs and expectations, the ethical use of technology in education, and helping students develop critical literacy skills in an area of misinformation. And as you know, that's just a few. In a society where information is at just about everyone's fingertips, what specific strategies or approaches have you found to be most effective in fostering genuine engagement and igniting curiosity in your students? So specific strategies to ignite engagement and curiosity. What do you do?
So I remembered my third thing, but it sort of fits into this question.
Perfect.
So I'll give that. So my third thing for the previous question was just be your authentic self and allow yourself to sort of be vulnerable and just be honest with students appropriately, obviously.
Yeah.
And for me, that's about, I mean, when I teach anatomy and I go in and the first thing I tell them is I'm an anatomy nerd, guys, and you're stuck with me. I love it. I'm very honest with them about that, and they just feed off it. So being that authentic self, I think, is really important. To specifically answer the question, for me, the thing that has been a total game changer for how I approach teaching has been my adoption of alternate grading or alternative grading and ungrading and specification-based grading. It's and the reflection that goes with it, because I've got to hear from students what happens inside their minds and their bodies when that fear of getting something wrong and it impacting their grade, how it just changes them as thinkers and learners. And I can't even, I can't, it's hard to put into words. I've just come off a winter semester where students, I've just finished reading like 4 or 5 page reflections from students talking about the impact of having this opportunity to just learn without that fear of getting a bad grade, and how it's given them that freedom to just think and explore and take chances and just learn for learning's sake. And I can't go back. I will never, ever go back to the way I used to do it now that I see the power that grades have over students' ability to think and to learn. So I don't see that I'm doing that, right? All I'm doing is removing that pressure, removing that fear, and then the students do the rest. Like the conversations they have, and the reflections that they share with me about their learning experience, about themselves as learners, about themselves as soon-to-be young professionals is really phenomenal and amazing. And all it took was just remove that fear of failing due to the grade, and it's amazing.
I think it would be an easy sell if you were able to talk to people and tell them all the reasons why students find that so much better. But for a faculty member who's hesitant about changing the way they evaluate and grade, what might be the 1 or 2 things you would say to them that would get them to try it? Just try it. It's scary as heck. It's scary as heck. The first time I did it, it was during COVID. And my syllabus, the course was going live the next day, and I had to finalize my syllabus. And am I doing traditional or am I going ungraded? And I just said, let's just do it. Yeah. Just do it. And I was, like you mentioned this morning, it was scary, right? It's very scary. But I was very honest with students. I said, we're trying this, but I have your back, right? It was building that trust. Nothing that I do with this experiment, and I told them it was an experiment. I said, this could fail miserably, but it's not going to impact you, the outcome of the course or the grade, because they still got a grade. And they appreciated that. Because of that, they gave me amazing feedback as I went. So yeah, do it, reach out. There's lots of people on campus now who are doing these types of things and who would love to talk about it and chat about it. And it doesn't have to be a whole course. I'm not doing it with a whole course. You can do bits and pieces of courses as a way just to try it and see how it works. Maybe it doesn't necessarily work for all courses. I think it can. But yeah, reach out. There's lots of people to help and lots of people who are doing those types. There's tons of stuff online, lots of blogs. There's lots of help out there, and I do encourage you to. And I will say we have some of the best resource people at CITL when you're developing courses.
Yes,
I've done it a couple
CITL,
times
absolutely.
now, and they have ideas that some of my peers, I'd never get to that conversation. So I think it's amazing the resources we have at our fingertips, but we don't often remember them right away. Dr. Côté, do you want to take your chance at this question?
What's the expression? Can I have a 2-finger, or can I have a follow-up to Jeannette about something?
Yeah, of course.
I'd love to know from your experience, what's the, if you tell me ungrading, what I'm hearing is that do I have to not grade? And in which case, that's extremely appealing, but I'm guessing there's a lot of other work that goes into it. So in terms of workload of your, like, do you feel that this semester has been more, has involved more grading differently, or providing feedback than the norm, or has it been less than what you've used to?
So I'd say it's been very similar to because someone asked you that question this morning. Perhaps a little bit more reading because there's a lot of reflection and a lot of feedback, but it's way more fun, right? It's not reading an answer and saying, is that a 4.5 out of 6? Maybe it's a 5. And then am I being consistent? There's none of that. I just used to find that really, really stressful and not, in many cases, being objective, especially after you get to the 80th paper, right? So there is more work, but it's fun because you want to see what they're saying. It's fun. Yeah. Well, as, relatively speaking. It's not like lying on the beach and wherever, but it's close to Lego. Yeah. It's fun. It's just fun to see students and how they think and what they've learned, right? As opposed to I'm grading an exam now and oh, they got that wrong again, right? Yeah, it's fun.
Thanks a lot. One fad perhaps that I've seen and I haven't really used or integrated it, but we have a lot of those online setup that provides, I think that Top Hat is one of them, for instance, like these kind of programs that helps you gauge or interact with students rapidly. I always get emails every year saying, do you want to try? And I'm like, I don't know. I think that at least I've been fortunate that my classrooms have been small enough that I can tell if they're not paying attention, or I can tell based on their face expression if something has not been understood. So to me, it remains one of those things that I can perhaps see a benefit. I'm not really sure if this is for me. But for those of you who were here this morning, I'm a huge fan of reflection, but to make people realize not just, what is the argument of an article and et cetera, but also where does it fit? Where do you see, why do you think I assigned it? What was so original about this piece that I made you read this over the last day or so? And I find that this is something that's, it's not a creative or it's not a new kind of assignment or exercise, but I find that it's really, really an essential building block in students' learning process.
Yeah, I agree. And I've told students when they say, what are you looking for with this assignment? I say, pretend you're the teacher here. What would you want a student to talk about? And then they almost can fill in the matrix or whatever you want to call it. They know the learning objective. And if you can figure out the learning objective, it's 100% grade or no grade, but that's what it is. Yeah, so that's a great point. Dr. Eaton?
Yeah, when you asked this question, it reminded me of an anecdote. I think one of the most uncomfortable things a student ever said to me, I was a grad student and I'd known them for a couple of months, and they were super excited to be in the program and all about the learning. And then they said, I want your life. I want to be you. I want to be the next you. And I found that so upsetting. Because it never occurred to me that that's what a student would aspire to with me or with any professor. But to that student, the best thing they felt they could achieve was to be somebody's protege. And so we worked long and hard, and I said, I don't want a disciple. I want you to be the best version of you, whatever that looks like for you in your life and in your career. But the student, they couldn't process that for a while. And it took us a few months of working together when I'm like, what are your ideas? What matters to you? And they said, what do you think? No, we're not going there. But it kind of reminded me that not all students come with the same basis or this idea that they themselves can be the best version of them. And to be able to work with our students where they're at to help them realize what their goals are and grow into themselves.
Yeah, that's really good. And it's also a really vulnerable place for a student to say that. I mean, they're basically fessing up that, you're their dream, but it's a lot of pressure, right? It's a lot of pressure. Well, you don't want them to have the dream, but deep down it is saying something about you too. And I think we don't congratulate ourselves enough about if you care. It is a burden sometimes when you care. But the payoff is getting someone out the other end. And that sometimes doesn't mean they finish a certain program. but you get them out the other end and they're okay. I will say the longer I've taught, I always felt each year that I was feeling more like I had precious cargo and that there was a lot of responsibility there, but ultimately there was a privilege. Like, how amazing is it that you have this audience and you're in charge of these learning objectives and they're going to take them into the world? So I just think all of you reflect that you definitely feel that privilege to teach. And I wish everyone had the chance to do it formally, but I do think everyone has the chance in their life. You just have to choose it. So that really, really great reflections. Okay, so our next question, and Dr. Eaton, if you're not too tired because you went last, I'll get you to go first on this one. So this is a big one, and I'd like you really to delve into it. We have the time, so don't feel that you're restricted, and we can make it a conversation at the end. So reflecting on this year's conference, what has inspired you the most as a learner, and why?
Well, being a visitor, you get to see everything with fresh eyes. So I feel like I've been perpetually inspired. I'm exhausted by all of the inspiration. So I was inspired by my fellow keynote speaker and by the reflections and inspired by the organization. I feel like sometimes the success of the events isn't what we see, but what we don't see. So I saw like an absence of problems and an absence of chaos. I did see chaos in the Lego workshop, but it was the best kind of chaos. So I was inspired by that, and the sessions that I went to helped me kind of think about things in a different way. When you're at your own university, you get to know your colleagues and you're like, okay, so-and-so's doing this session at the Teaching and Learning Conference, and I have a good idea what they're going to say, but here everything has been new and fresh. And I feel like it was a really special time to be here for the announcement of the president and to have that coincide with a Teaching and Learning Conference. I've never seen it before, and I'm not sure I'll ever get to see it again.
And a president who's definitely a student-centered individual. So I think that it was a good coincidence that it happened. And the vibe has been vibing. It's been pretty cool. I'm not cool enough to say that without laughing, but I tried. My daughter will never see this. We'll delete it off the internet.
Recorded it.
Delete it off the internet, yeah. So I think that's a really good reflection. And I also think that when we are learners through our students, I think that's huge, and I think that's part of what you've all been saying as well. You develop because of your students, really, right? Yeah. Dr. Côté? What inspired you most as a learner at the conference?
So unfortunately, I missed yesterday, but I was lucky to be able to attend the panel just before the session, and I think I saw Melanie, hi, and Karen. I think she left, but the session on peer review really appealed to me. I signed up as a peer reviewer and never heard from anyone, but based on your presentation, it really made me reflect about how I think initially we think of peer review as something that we do as a young, as a young instructor, as in like in your first few years so that you learn to get better. But I think what your session also showed is that you can use it at multiple stages in your career, at the very beginning, but also middle or towards the end. The point being that perhaps you avoid getting stale or like being repetitive or not challenging yourself. And so I really like this. So what I learned is that as a more mature instructor, there's still a whole lot that could be done, and not so much, and perhaps it would be done differently than one of my younger colleagues could use it, but at the same time, it's as valuable, if not more. And I love the pairing of people from different learn backgrounds. So thank you very much for that. I didn't get a chance to tell you that earlier, so thank you.
That's great. I also I'm not plugging administrative jobs, not in this climate, I promise, but I'm going to say something that might be a bit contentious. There are people around us who teach and they genuinely need a break or a different space. And sometimes they need to be encouraged to take that. Sometimes it's a sabbatical to learn more about how you can teach differently. But sometimes it's looking at the other jobs that are available to us in a university setting. Sometimes it's at MIN. Sometimes it could be not for profit and taking a leave. But I do think we have other avenues to become different teachers outside the faculty. So I think that you reminded me of that when you were talking about the peer review. So Dr. Byrne, your greatest lessons and why?
My greatest lessons. So I got to do a session today with my colleague and friend and mentor, Dr. T.A. Loeffler. It's the first time I think we've ever taught together. I just sort of stood in the background and got to say a few words, but that was kind of fun. I'm so lucky in HKR. We have such amazing students, or we have fabulous students, but we have amazing teachers as well. And
Yep.
TA has been one of them. Isabelle was thanking her mentors, and she's been one of mine. So that was certainly a highlight for me personally. But as an educator here, first of all, I'm going to echo what many of us have already said. We are so fortunate to have CITL. You are absolutely amazing, and I can't believe that I actually didn't really. It's another good thing that came from COVID, because prior to COVID, you were just the distance education people, right? But COVID came along, and I needed you, and you were there.
We all did.
I know we all did, but right.
They're still stressed, I'd say.
Yeah,
from all of us.
So, I mean, I've been a bit more involved in this conference, so I've been reflecting a little bit more, but we are so fortunate to have each and every one of you. So I thank you for that. And then the other piece that I've been reflecting on is just we've got some really amazing things happening here at this institution. I think when we're in our own bubbles and the term is long and the winter is long and it's still not even spring out, and it's just, you just get caught in your little space of negativity. And I think coming to an event like this and just engaging with other learners and teachers and students and colleagues has been just amazing. And it's also been really amazing over the years to see the presentations. Like we're shifting, right? We're shifting. There's such a focus on learning now, and I'm just really excited for where we're headed and what's happening next. It's an exciting time to be teaching at Memorial. And then I think the cherry on top is our new president, who what a perfect way for her to be introduced to all of us sitting at a teaching and learning conference.
And if you haven't had a chance, there's some things online you can read about the new president, and you'll see why we're saying the things we're saying. But it's definitely, she's from student-centered, right the beginning of her career, I would say. So it's a really great addition to our community. I just want to ad-lib. I think we have time, Ruth. Am I right? Yeah. So since I am in one of those monstrous no one wants admin jobs, it's actually really great. You just get a different lens on education. But the hard part is you don't always have the resources to do the things that the people need. But all educational institutions across Canada are facing that right now, resource depletion and cuts. All of us are in the same boat, which misery loves company, maybe, I don't know. But this conference, this opportunity, you as teachers and mentors, what are the top things you need to continue to be successful with innovation? Maybe I feel guilty that I'm asking that, but I really would love to know, particularly since I'm in administration now. So Isabelle, maybe you could.
Sure. I would say time and community. Time to be able to do things well. So Elsa Craig this morning asked a question about the kind of time commitment that we're required to try to develop new innovative projects. And yes, there definitely is an aspect that I was only able to do some of these things because I happen to have a course remission. Yay. But what could happen if people could apply to get course remission and then to be able to use that for a learning outcome? I think it would be great. Alternatively, to Jeannette's point, but space of community, places for people to be able to engage with learning challenges or academic. How do we want what kind of university do we want? What kind of learning experience do we want to provide our students? And so those kind of community events, or when I say community, I mean, MUN as a community, not so much reaching out to people on Water Street and saying, do you want to be part?
Yep.
But to make sure that, we're talking to, we're developing spaces for colleagues at your department level, at your faculty level, at the university level, to discuss these things. And I'm extremely grateful that CITL here provided us with such an opportunity.
Yeah, and having those spaces be accessible in all the ways, as much as we can. Yeah, Dr. Eaton?
Well, time came to my mind as well. More time to think and be reflective. Yes, and then if I could add on to that, would be fewer emails.
For all of us, please.
For all of
We've
us.
gone awry with the email. I don't know how we can correct course, but yeah.
I would really love it if a university administrator anywhere would say, shut off your email at 5:00 on Friday and don't open it again till 8:30 on Monday. But I don't think that happens in Canada anywhere.
No, I mean, there's plenty of people who put on their signature, I might be replying out of office hours, please don't feel the pressure. But I think all of us just feel pressure. And I think that's a genuine feeling. I believe everyone who tells me that. Yeah, for sure. Dr. Byrne?
Time, again, for sure. So I won't belabor that. But I'm going to go back to the caring piece. I think we need to show students that we care, but I also think it needs to come the other way too. And I think we need to feel like someone cares about what we're doing. Not that we don't do this for recognition, and it's not about recognition. It's just feeling like you're appreciated and cared for what you do. And it's just little things like not sending the email at whatever time, or not making it so difficult to try and find a space to do lab X or book the computer. Like it's just little things, right?
Yep.
That speak to, we care and we value the teaching and what you're trying to do.
And I personally feel, I mean, we say COVID all the time as like a landmark almost of some sort, because it really is. It certainly changed my life and my family's life and my work family's life. But that care piece overall, I don't know how all of you might feel, but it's like we were disconnected for a time, and I'm not sure we've corrected course and gotten back to where we were. And maybe that is not the goal. Maybe it's just to get a little bit back. I'm not sure with technology, maybe that's the case. CITL, that's your job. You got to figure out that now. How do we get back? If anyone can figure it out, CITL can, but how to get back to where we were. And where we were wasn't perfect, but I do feel there is a disconnect. And I think when faculty say that they want caring, that's part of it. And I think seeing some empty halls more recently, we see a lot more empty halls. I think it's because people feel that they're not cared for, and also may not have the bandwidth to then care for others outside of their home unit. I mean, most of us here working at home full time while also doing all the things, but we all pretended that wasn't the case. So when I was braiding my daughter's hair while on with my dean, I just thought that was going to be normal. And we've moved away from that, but we haven't really talked about it. So I think that's part of it. We need to correct what we've lost a little bit. So, but again, CITL is a part of that. I really think, no pressure, but I do think it's part of it. So I'm not sure if there's any questions online, but we'll moderate those.
And we can take questions in the room.
Perfect, yeah. So are there any questions in the room for the panelists?
Okay. Oh, I don't even have to push the button. Can you talk about a teaching and learning thing that came off the rails and how you talked yourself through it?
It's a great one.
Okay, maybe.
You're going to offer it up.
Yeah,
You're going to be the
sure.
first.
My first year, so again, as I mentioned this morning, political scientists, many of them are budding law, they have a law career in their kind of, on their radar. And so because of that, the temptation is often to do debates in class. But I had assumed that people knew what debates were and that they would prepare as such. And I did a debate way too early of my first course in my first semester teaching at MUN. And that poor chap had no idea. And he signed up to do the first one, and it did not go well. And he quit the class after. And this haunts me still because he was one of the quieter person. He was not a future legal scholar. And I remember recalibrating after that, thinking I have to stop thinking that all political scientists are loud and love the attention. He was not like that. And so ever since, I've been more careful to make sure that my teaching style is inclusive of all type of needs from students, but also that activities that are perhaps a little bit more outside of people's comfort zone come later on in the semester, so that by then, hopefully, they are feeling more comfortable with their classmates. They're feeling more trusting towards us, towards me, that they feel that I would have their back if they say something wrong or, if they make a mistake. And this was, first month of my first course at MUN.
And you still remember it that clearly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That tells you, though, that you want to develop and learn, and that's amazing. Do you want to go next, Dr. Byrne?
Sure, I can go next. So I teach an anatomy course, which is a second-year course in our program, and I made some pretty major changes to it about 2 years ago, and I had this idea for a project. I called it a body map. I wanted students to just be able to create their body and where are all the muscles. And so I knew the general idea for the project, but I had no idea what they were going to do with that information. I just wanted to say, here's what you have to do. I had a general picture in my head, but I said to them up front, I said, I can't really tell you what this needs to look like because I don't actually even know. And I didn't want to confine them by saying, this is what it needs to look like, because I wanted them to just take it and run with it. But some of them just ran in the wrong direction. And it wasn't a graded, it was specifications-based grading. So if you did A, B, C, and D, you got the grade and whatnot. But some of them just went in the total, I was like, how did you get to X from what I said? And I couldn't fail them because they basically followed the instructions. But I had because the project was so new to me, I hadn't thought through all of the infinitely many possibilities. So I took that as a learning. I don't think I would have changed what I had done, but it was an example of me sort of just diving in and saying, okay, there has to be a first one. But I guess how I handled it was just being very honest and upfront with the students and saying, okay, I never in a million years would have thought someone would have went like that. How I changed it then the next year was they had to do there was an optional, the first year there was an optional draft submission that they could do, so I could make sure they were at least within the confines of what I was thinking, because I still didn't want to guide them too much. Yep. So I added they had to submit a draft, just like 5 muscles out of 60 or something, just so I could make sure they were on the right track. So I wouldn't change anything that I did because there's no way I could have anticipated. But again, just being honest with the students and saying, okay, that's not what I was expecting. Yeah.
Yeah. The drafts of large assignments, I think, are a really good, easy tip. Mm-hmm. I've also learned that lesson the hard way. I'll end it there. Dr. Eaton?
Yeah, thinking about a particular student I had in an online course maybe 10, 15 years ago. And so understanding some constraints in this multi-section course, right? So I didn't have autonomy over the course design. All the sections had the same course design. They all had discussion boards, the same assignments, same due dates. And in the context that I'm in, we're not allowed to grade for participation. So the assessed components were the discussion board and a couple of assignments. And there was a there was a person enrolled in the course, and I paused there as I pull on the vocabulary of an Australian colleague, Kath Ellis, who differentiates between students or learners and enrolled persons. So I had an enrolled person in this class, didn't do any of the assignments, didn't do any of the discussion boards, kept emailing the student, please come to the synchronous sessions, please get in touch with me, nothing until the final 2 hours of the course. And then all of the discussion board posts were posted. All of the assignments came into the D2L Dropbox all at once. Well, in my world, that is the telltale sign of someone using a term paper mill, of having someone else complete their academic work for them, and then they just upload it. And I was right. The student hasn't learned anything. They haven't been part of our learning community. What do I do? And in the end, I was told I had to grade the assignments because they had submitted them. But it started all of these conversations in our School of Education, and now, like, as a result of that, if people are still using discussion boards, they close at the end of the week. And if you haven't posted, you don't get the grades. One assignment has to be done before the next one will be graded. And it sort of triggered a whole bunch of things because I got on my soapbox and they just wanted to shut me up. But it was this idea, I didn't have the word at the time or the phrase to the enrolled person, but that one really went off the rails because the person wasn't there to learn. They were just there to get a grade.
Mm-hmm. Using someone else's shell is tough, period. So yeah, I've had a couple experiences that were not so great. So thank you for that question, and thank you all. Any other questions from the audience?
Okay, we can go for one more.
Sorry, I apologize. I might not be a short one, but anyway, let me try. So I'm reflecting on, talking about the things that you would invite a new professor to. What do they need as their support? And one of you, I forget which one, but one of you talked about finding your people, finding your support group, and to me that speaks to the notion of community, which our scholarly communities, we need to find them. We need to find those groups. And we've talked a couple of times about COVID, and I think one of the things that we've lost or has changed dramatically through COVID is that sense of community. And I say pre-COVID, I used to eat lunch with colleagues every day. No reflection on my current colleagues, but nobody joins me for lunch these days anymore.
I haven't eaten lunch today.
Yeah, fair enough. Some of my current colleagues don't have time to join me. But I think it was, if we walk around the hallways, I think many of us will agree, you don't see the people around that you used to see, and that's because we're more comfortable working online and remotely, and our professors are not always social, and sometimes, particularly engineering professors, just to be stereotypical, and so they're happy enough to hide in their offices. How do we go about building the community again? And I guess, does that community sense look different now? I mean, I'm old enough that I want it to be like what it was 15 years ago, but maybe it's different. Maybe it just looks different. And can you talk about that?
Sure, I can. Thank you so much. This is a great question. And it's really interesting because until last year, I was a director of the Nexus Center, which is an interdisciplinary center at Memorial. Amy, you were one of our guest speakers for one of the talks. And it's interesting because I've been the director of that center for 3 years, which also coincided during the strike. And prior to the strike at Memorial, we had people who were not necessarily engaged because it was the post-COVID years. Then the strike took place, and I met a great number of colleagues who I would have never interacted with. People from nursing, people from kinesiology, I was on the same picket line as music. I had the entire music faculty on my line. I was the luckiest person ever. We had such a blast. So much so that we decided to keep in touch and to organize more events at the Nexus Center, just so that we can continue that community. And so I felt that, we talked about a positive impact of COVID. I think there was a positive impact of the strike, that there was a desire to discover more about our colleagues. Mm-hmm. And to some extent, places like the Nexus Center or CITL's teaching conference can play that role. But at the same time, I must admit, this was the first time I participated to the conference. The timing, and I have mentioned this to Ruth, I believe yesterday, is that we're all busy, and so carving a little bit of time from our schedule, even if it's just for lunch, it means that we don't have time to do something else, to grade or to respond to those emails that keep flooding our mailbox. So it's a choice, and it's perhaps encouraging or validating some of those choices of saying, centers like, attending conferences or participating in interdisciplinary talks is valued and is seen as a contribution, as opposed to, getting a free lunch or a free beverage or something like that.
Great. Ruth, how are we for time?
We're getting close. So we're getting close. So if the other two want to comment.
Okay. Community.
Yeah. I feel, this is my own perspective, I feel like we're grieving the loss of this community, whatever that was and whatever it looked like. And when we've grieved something we've lost, but I'm not sure we're going to get it back. I'm not convinced. But I don't know that we've actually accepted. We haven't gotten to that point of we have accepted the new normal yet. It might take a little while collectively and socially. I'm not sure we've settled into it. But I don't know that the new normal is actually going to be worse. But I feel like we need to finish the grieving process first.
Mm-hmm. And we'll finish with Dr. Byrne.
And just to add, I think community takes time. And I think particularly COVID's getting a really bad rap here today. It's done some good things, but I just feel so much busier. And I know I've chatted with so many people, like there just isn't time. Like, you want me to go to lunch? Okay, let's put it in my calendar. I can do it in 2.5 months or whatever, right? I had a colleague who was back in town and we just wanted to meet for coffee once a week and we couldn't do it. We didn't make it I don't know why, but it didn't happen, right? So I think, I don't know if we are busier, objectively more busy, or if it just feels that way, but there has to be a way to just free up some time to just converse and just be.